So, what if I told you that the exact same fundamental law governs your own mind, the planet Earth, and a single tiny atom? Well, we're about to dig into a source that says exactly that, proposing a kind of universal architecture for consciousness itself. Let's get into it. Just let that sink in for a second. The core idea here is pretty radical, that a mind, a planet, a company, even a storm, they're all just different magnifications of the same underlying field. Our job here is to try and unpack this idea, to see if we can understand this proposed Rosetta Stone for consciousness. All right, so here's our game plan for tackling this massive topic. First, we'll get a handle on the core metaphor, the consciousness field. Then, we're going to build the architecture of a self right from the ground up. After that, we'll look at the engine that actually drives change in this system. And finally, we'll ask the big question: what does this all mean for you and me, for our own place in this field? Okay, to even start to wrap our heads around this theory, we need an anchor. And thankfully, the source gives us a really powerful one, the idea that consciousness behaves just like a planet's magnetic field. And get this isn't just some poetic comparison. The source is proposing this as the actual physics of the system. It's asking us to picture a sphere of awareness, right? It's got two opposing poles, and energy is constantly flowing between them, kind of like seasonal currents. And the strength of that field, its amplitude, is what defines how coherent that consciousness actually is. So this entire field is basically defined by its main axis, these two fundamental poles. Let's just call them winter and summer to make it easy. The winter pole, that's all about an inward movement. It's about contraction, building stability, getting solid. And its total opposite, summer, is all about outward expansion, radiance, and really engaging with the world around it. In this model, every single self is just constantly navigating that flow between these two poles. Okay, so if everything is a field, how does it build complexity? How do you get from a simple back-and-forth polarity to something as complex as a person or a company or a whole planet? Well, the source explains this through something it calls the universal stack. As you can see here, complexity builds in a really specific pattern, a progression of numbers: 1, 2, 4, 12, and finally 24. This sequence is presented as the architectural backbone for any conscious system, no matter the scale. It's like a universal blueprint for building a self. So let's start at the very beginning, with the simplest possible unit. It all starts with one, a single fundamental point of existence, the very beginning of any identity. This first unit is called a node, and a node is simply a stable self at any given scale. You can think of it as the smallest possible point of coherent identity. It's the fundamental Lego brick that everything else is built from. And this is where the sheer scale of this idea just kind of hits you. A node isn't just a person. It can be a rock, a company, a tectonic plate, an electron, or even an entire planet. Basically, anything with a stable, coherent identity qualifies as a node in this field. It's wild. So once you have one node, the next logical step is two, right? What happens when two of these points of identity start to interact with each other? You get a pair, but here's the key. A pair isn't just two separate things sitting there. It's a complete circuit. When two nodes interact, think a proton and an electron, or even a teacher and a student, they create the very first seasonal engine. They actually generate a current, a flow, a momentum between them. From that simple circuit of two, we expand to the number 4, and it's at this level that we find the very first state of true wholeness in the system. This level is called the family, and it represents a complete cycle, like a full 4 seasons. It doesn't just have the winter and summer poles we talked about, but it also has the transitional currents that flow between them. The source calls this the smallest possible whole unit, the complete template for a self-sustaining organism. All right, from that self-sustaining family of 4, the architecture scales up again to the level of the team, which is made up of 12 parts. These 12 teams act as the structural components for the whole field. And I love this analogy the source uses. They are the tectonic plates of consciousness. Now, it's really important to note these aren't personality types. They're more like fundamental functions, like the organ systems in a body or the different departments in a company, finance, marketing, operations. Each plate has a really distinct job that helps give the whole field its shape. And this brings us to the final layer, the top of the stack, the whole shebang, the number 24, which represents the full all-encompassing architecture of a self. At the level of 24, we have the complete field. The source describes these as 24 stable configurations or archetypes where a whole self can exist. These are the universal behavioral templates that apply at every single scale, from the way an atom behaves all the way up to the structure of an entire civilization. So we have this incredible architecture, but it's static, right? It's a blueprint. What makes it move? What drives change and evolution? Well, the answer lies in the engine of the whole system, the seasonal cycle. Everything exists in this constant cycle of change, moving through 4 phases. It starts with integration, a kind of softening. This leads into expansion. That's the peak summer energy we mentioned earlier. That's followed by a loosening and an opening, which finally leads back to formation and stability, that peak winter energy. This continuous loop is the engine that drives momentum in absolutely everything, from our personal lives to global economies. So, after exploring this vast cosmic architecture, what does it all mean for us, for our personal sense of who we are? This brings us to what the source calls the fractal perspective. And this, right here, is really the philosophical heart of the entire theory. It suggests that your identity isn't fixed. You aren't just one single node. You can experience yourself as a single point, as part of a pair, a team, or even as the entire field of 24 archetypes. Your identity is fluid, and it can move across all these different scales of being. So, we're left with a really powerful question to think about. If your identity isn't some fixed thing, but a dynamic position in this universal field, where are you standing right now? Do you feel like a single node, part of a pair, a member of a team? Or are you feeling connected to the whole field? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.